The Marvel Cinematic Universe. The biggest pop culture movement since the Beatles, $22.5 billion at the box office, and we found the one guy who doesn't have a clue what we're talking about. With two fellow MCU nerds to help guide his hand along the way, one thing is for certain, we're with him until the end of the line. Welcome to Colin Brain versus the MCU. On your left. Hello and welcome to your favourite MCU podcast designed for your ear holes. We are now well over the halfway point of Phase 2 and this week we are going cosmic, baby. So after last week's somewhat successful viewing of Captain America the Winter Soldier, we watch one of, maybe Marvel's biggest risk yet, the Guardians of the Galaxy. But as always, before we kick off proceedings, please allow me to introduce my fellow co-hosts. Firstly, it's only fair, considering that the villain in this film is called Ronan the Accuser, that my co-host may now be known as Rob the Annoying. Rob, say hello.
I am Groot.
Oh, I like it. Rob's nickname this week might not make much sense to Colin. Colin,
no, it
you're
does.
looking at the nickname right now. Does it make sense to you?
It does, yeah. It's from the post-credit scene, right?
Oh, okay. So Rob's nickname this week is How... I can't believe I have to say this to the public every week, some of your nicknames. It's Howard the Fuck.
So creative this week, man.
Yeah, well done.
There were some alternative ones, and would you believe that was the best?
We believe it. So, and last but not least, the man of the hour, the man whom without his presence, this podcast would just be two idiots blathering on about how much they love Marvel. It's Colin the Virgin, of all MCU-related things, of course. Colin,
Right.
say hello. Sorry.
I was waiting for Brain at the end, but okay. Apparently my last name isn't a thing anymore.
No, well, it will be next week, but this week you are Colin the Virgin.
Oh, lovely. Okay. How's it going?
Yes.
You all right?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm doing well. It's good to speak to you boys again.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks since we
Yeah, it
last.
has.
Yeah. What did even know you lot aren't going to know that. Rob, how are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, trying to... Well, we have another podcast, don't we, George? So right now...
We do.
There is a lot of I don't want to refer to it as admin, but there's a lot of stuff to watch.
There is.
And as you kindly put it, I don't help myself because I give myself a load of extra things that I do, which no one asks for, and that are stupid. So I spent a good 20 minutes trying to think of a name for our Zoom call today. That could have been...
And after those 20 minutes, we still landed on Howard the Fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all those jingles, mate. You put in too much time into the jingles, which I love, by the way.
You say that. That's probably the least amount of time spent.
So Rob kind of knows the situation I'm in this week. Colin does not yet know, but I am going to somewhat struggle maybe through this podcast because I've had quite a bit of dental work done this week. So for the last couple of months, I've been having quite a bit of pain, one of my teeth. And because of various lockdown reasons or anything like that, dentists is still very difficult to get an appointment. It got to the point where the pain was so unbearable, I had to book an appointment, and it was still 2 months away. So I was on a 2-month waiting list just for them to look at my tooth. And as soon as they looked at it, they were like, "Yep, that needs to come out. That needs to be extracted straight away. That's fucked. It's Howard the fucked that tooth." So then I had to wait another week before that extraction appointment, and they immediately sat me down. They started. They gave me a couple of anesthesia injections around the tooth. I had about 2 or 3, and it hurt quite a bit. And it always does hurt, but it doesn't usually hurt that much. Waited 5-10 minutes for it to go numb, and they said, "Right, we're going to begin." And they literally took some pliers to my tooth and just started trying to crunch the tooth into small little bits. I felt lots of crunching, lots of twisting, and they said, "You're going to feel some discomfort, but lift up your left hand if you're in any pain whatsoever." The second they started crunching this tooth, I was like, boom, hand up. I was like, "That hurts." And they were like, "Oh, discomfort or pain?" I was like, "Pain, searing pain." And they were like, "Oh." Another 2-3 injections. Pain.
Put us there, George. Put us in the scene.
They were like, another 2-3 injections. There we go. Wait another 5-10 minutes. And by this point, I couldn't feel any of my face. I couldn't even, my face was so numb, I couldn't feel myself swallowing. I thought I wasn't swallowing. It was that numb. It was really confusing. And they were like, are you ready? And my response was obviously, so they started crunching again. And the first big crunch, I felt them take some big chunks of the tooth, but straight away, arm up. That hurts. And then they were like, well, this is weird. You've had twice as much anaesthetic as you should have had. Maybe we should take an x-ray. They took an x-ray, and the dental nurse, once she took a look at the x-ray, she put it very politely. She shook her head, put her head in her hands, and said the word, "Oh, fiddlesticks." Very English response.
How old is this
to which
person?
I then looked at the dentist and said,
Fiddlesticks.
this isn't going well, is it? And they said, no, you've got a massive infection, and it's actually, it's in your gums now. It's spread to the gums, and it's spread to the surrounding teeth around this tooth that we're trying to take out as well. Ooh. That's why you're in so much pain, because no matter how many anesthesia injections we give you, you're still going to be in a lot of pain. So unfortunately, we cannot continue the extraction. We have to send you home. But I said, I've got half a tooth hanging in my mouth. There's shards of it all everywhere. It's wobbling. Can't you just finish it? And they were like, no, you're in too much pain. So I still have half a hanging tooth in my mouth, and I'm still in a lot of pain, even though the painkillers they give me were for people who have just had operations.
Jesus
so I'm also
Christ.
high as a bloody kite.
I was going to say, you tripping out.
Yeah, big time. And
Cosmic,
yeah,
baby.
So, exactly. We are definitely going cosmic this week.
So, what have they got to do next week then? Are they going in and taking more and more out? Or
they I'm on a very strong course of antibiotics as well. So I'm going back in 8:30 Monday morning, where hopefully the infection is gone, and they're going to try again. Oh. So I'm absolutely dreading it. So I almost cancelled this week because I thought, am I going to do it? But I've just taken some painkillers. I'm not on the beers this week for this podcast. I'm on a lot of water.
Explains
so
why.
Here we go.
Especially why you've called me Rob the Annoying this week, because after you initially told me that story, I noticed that you sent that text at 10 to 3, and I said, so you likely they were doing this at 2:30, George, weren't they?
Fuck's
It's good, like 3 minutes pause. 2:30, George.
It was spot on. My appointment was 1:45, and they were still trying to get that tooth out by 2:30, and about 2:30 when they gave up. So yeah, Rob got it spot on, and I hated that he was right. So, on to Marvel-related stuff. Colin, again, much like The Winter Soldier, I know that you'd said you'd seen this film before on a plane, I remember?
Yeah. What year did this come out?
2014.
Okay, yeah, it would. Yeah, probably a trip home from Penang, I would have thought. How quickly do they go onto the planes when they come out?
Very quick.
Oh, is it? Yeah, that would have been.
Usually.
I did, but you know what it's like when you watch a film on a plane, though? It's. I mean, I think I was probably using their shitty little headphones, which you can, they're not noise cancelling or whatever. Yeah. So there's only so much you can get into a film on a plane, I find.
Sure, so even then, kind of maybe have already answered my question, but once this film got going, did you remember a lot of it, or did it feel fairly fresh?
There were a couple of bits I remembered. I definitely remembered enjoying the zero gravity prison breakout scene.
Yep, awesome.
But other than that, and to be honest, I don't even really remember if I might have fallen asleep through it or whatever. You know what it's like when you're on a plane.
Of course.
But yeah, I didn't remember a lot. Just a few bits, and obviously the general kind of storyline and characters and stuff. But
okay,
it felt fresh watching it again today.
Good.
So far, so good. Skip the compliments. Let's get on with it.
Okay, so as always, you relax, boys, and I'm going to provide a brief background to the film. See, he's struggling already. And this is for both Colin and the listeners. And as always, Colin, any questions, please ask, and I'm sure we will be able to answer between us. So, are you ready?
Let's go.
Perfect. So, I think it's to say, and I said this at the beginning as well, that this is probably Marvel's biggest risk yet. It's as As much as a risk as maybe Iron Man 1 was, I reckon, but you'd be surprised to know that this was actually one of the first films and scripts that Marvel actually got round to developing. It just obviously took a lot longer than the other entries so far to make it to the big screen. So it was actually around the time that they were making Iron Man, the first MCU entry. Marvel created a screenwriting program in which they would take like a whole bunch of new up-and-coming screenwriters and essentially just ask them to write a whole bunch of scripts. And it was from those scripts they would decide if any future films could maybe developed from them, whether they could just take different ideas from these scripts. And it would also give them like a little indication as to any writers maybe they should keep their eye on. And so one of those scripts developed actually in around 2010 was Guardians of the Galaxy. And that was wrote by Nicole Perlman. So in her words, we got to choose from a list of half a dozen properties that they had that were lesser Marvel properties. There was no guarantee that these projects would ever get made, and there were properties on that list that were much better known. There were things that people had heard of. But I saw Guardians of the Galaxy and I took it. And it's kind of amazing looking back on it, how much freedom I was given. Maybe that's because it was kind of far-fetched, this idea that this project would actually get chosen to be produced, that I was actually given an enormous amount of creative freedom in the way that I don't think you actually get a lot from studios. They basically said, here are the comics, come up with a good story, choose the characters you like, and we'll just keep playing with it. Now, Perlman settled on the lineup for the Guardians of the Galaxy, so Peter Quill, Gamora, Drax the Destroyer, Rocket the Raccoon, and Groot. In the Guardians of the Galaxy comics, there's been lots of different members from time to time. It's been like quite a revolving group, as the Avengers were in the comics as well. But the main villain for most of her drafts of the script was actually Thanos. And that is until Marvel actually decided they wanted to save Thanos for later, but we'll get into that.
Next time, baby. So around early 2012, that's when Marvel hired a guy called James Gunn to rewrite Nicole Perlman's script and actually direct Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, James Gunn was somewhat of an odd choice or an unlikely choice for Guardians of the Galaxy. He'd previously made some films that were somewhat dark, maybe a little disturbing, definitely not what Marvel and Disney was sort of had their eyes on. So a horror film, maybe you've seen it, Colin, or heard of it, called Sliver.
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
That was James Gunn. A film called, a much smaller film called Super. What's the name of the guy in it, Rob? He's in
Rainn Wilson. Plays Dwight in The Office.
Actually, yeah. Is it a superhero kind of? He's dressed
kind
up
of. He dresses up as a superhero. Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that actually. I don't know when.
There you go.
He also wrote the Scooby-Doo films.
He did. He wrote Scooby-Doo, and he also wrote Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake. So he was actually in the final two to direct this film, or the second guy who it almost went to was, yet again, another very odd choice, the director of the cheerleader comedy Bring It On, a guy called Peyton Reed. But obviously this went to Mr. James Gunn. So he set about reworking Perlman's script to his liking. Now, this was a matter that became contentious, shall we say, once the film was a hit. There was lots of questions as to how much of an input James Gunn had. He said, 99% of the script was his, yet if you look at the credits at the opening of the film, it does say screenplay by Nicole Perlman and James Gunn. So James Gunn was asked about it recently, and he said she definitely got the ball rolling. The original concept was there. That was what's sort of in the movie. There's the story and the characters, though. Those were pretty much recreated by me. Someone also recently asked Marvel Studios president, Mr. Kevin Feige, and asked him about the different contributions between Gunn and Perlman. And he's quoted as saying, much of it had been, at least the bones of it, had been in Nicole Perlman's draft. The character lineup was essentially hers, and the overall structure was kind of the same. But the Walkman is all James Gunn. A lot of the story beats and all of the dialogue that you see in the actual movies is James. And he also mentioned that Yondu, the character Yondu, was all James Gunn's creation and input into the script as well. Because in the early draft, all the Guardians, they encountered each other. The first time they encountered each other was actually in the prison. as opposed to, them actually encountering each other back on Xandar. That was all James Gunn. And obviously, James really wanted to include Yondu in this as well, because he loved the backstory of Peter having been raised essentially by Yondu and the Ravagers. And he wanted to develop that, maybe not just in this film, but he was going to hopefully develop that in future films as well, that sort of relationship between Peter and Yondu and Peter and the Ravagers. So now, as it's been the case for the last couple of films we've covered on this podcast, James Gunn was actually given complete freedom, yet again, but he was told a couple of things he needed to do or introduce, in order to fit in with the larger story arc that Marvel and Kevin Feige had planned. So this film, it had to have Thanos in the film. He couldn't be the main villain, but we also had to get a bit more of a larger introduction to the Infinity Stones. Now, slight spoilers, James Gunn still does today have a very, very good relationship with Marvel. But he was quite vocal about the Thanos decision, the fact that Marvel wanted him included in the script. James Gunn is quoted as saying, "There's pressure with Thanos because you're setting up this gigantic character. But in a way, he's not really part of my movie. His presence doesn't really serve being in Guardians, and having Thanos be in these scenes was more helpful actually to the Marvel Universe than it was to the Guardians of the Galaxy. But I've always wanted to have Thanos in there, but from a structural standpoint, you don't need him. So that's part of it, and then part of it is the fact that you're setting up this incredibly powerful character, but you don't want to belittle the actual antagonist of the film, which is Ronan. You don't want him to seem like a big wussy. How do you make that work? It was tough." So casting on Guardians actually began whilst James Gunn was actually still working on his version of the script. So actors seen for Peter Quill or Star-Lord were Joel Edgerton, Eddie Redmayne, and Lee Pace, who actually ended up getting the role of Ronan the Accuser. Now, when Chris Pratt auditioned, he was actually currently known as the lovable idiot Andy on the popular TV show Parks and Recreation. He'd also just finished shooting a film called Delivery Man, and both his roles on Parks and Rec and Delivery Man required him to be, shall we say, quite a big guy. He'd come very close to actually gaining massive stardom in the couple of years before this as well. He had amazing auditions and came very, very close to landing massive roles in both J.J. Abrams' Star Trek and James Cameron's Avatar. Now, his audition for Guardians of the Galaxy, he absolutely nailed it. Apparently, 30 seconds into the audition, James Gunn was like, "This might be our guy." But the discussion the discussion took place as to whether he fit the archetype of what a superhero should maybe look like.
So basically, give him a bucket of steroids and we'll see him in a few months. Was that what was discussed?
It's kind of the case. Maybe replace the bucket of steroids with a nutritionist and a personal trainer. Yeah. Just so Marvel's lawyers don't come calling. But he guaranteed both Marvel and James Gunn that if they hired him, he promised to arrive on day one in the best shape of his life. Zoe Saldana as Gamora was actually an incredibly easy casting. She was one of the first to audition and the role was offered to her straight away. The role of Drax the Destroyer was a little more complicated. The last two came down to ex-WWE wrestler Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa, who was quite a sought-after actor after just finishing work on Game of Thrones as Khal Drogo. Dave Bautista was then asked to do a screen test with Chris Pratt, both of them in full makeup and costume, and James Gunn has said it's one of the best auditions he'd ever seen. And then he went to then cast a fairly unknown at the time, Dave Bautista. We've also obviously got, this is incredible casting that blows my mind every single time. We've got Bradley Cooper as Rocket the Raccoon and Vin Diesel as Groot. And Vin Diesel absolutely loved doing this so much. He actually offered to record all of his lines in all the different languages the films were going to be presented in as well. So he recorded all of his lines in Russian, Mandarin, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and French, just so they could use his real voice in the film around the world.
Did you know something about that as well? Mm-hmm. Firstly, this was the first film that Vin Diesel did after the death of Paul Walker. So he said it was a massive thing, and him getting over sort of he was dealing with getting over the loss of his friend, and playing a character who was so sort of like positive and sort of praised life and that kind of thing it really helped him. But also, did you know this is an audio commentary, so you're right. This is a IMDb fact.
Oh.
IMDb fact.
Oh my
Not
God.
a Dalek fact?
It sounded like my dad's clock going off.
Did you know that Groot means big in both Dutch, Afrikaans, and Flemish? So it roughly translates to I am big. And Mr. Vin Diesel, he's definitely not a small man.
No, he is not. So, filming on Guardians of the Galaxy began in July 2013 in London. You actually might recognise quite a lot of central London in some of the final battle sequences on Xandar. And the shooting ran all the way through till October. Now, because it crossed over with the production schedule for Parks and Recreation, Chris Pratt actually had to get permission from NBC to sit a few episodes of the sitcom out. But the showrunner, Michael Schur, the idea was to do a 2-part season opener of Parks and Rec in which the characters visited London. So that way Chris Pratt was actually able to shoot scenes for the season premiere whilst also shooting Guardians of the Galaxy. And in the sitcom as well, by the time that last season ended, the one before it, Andy was still quite a big guy with quite a beer belly. And now suddenly he can only be described as hench. It's explained in the sitcom that all it was that he simply just stopped drinking beer. So it is mentioned in Parks and Rec as well. So Guardians of the Galaxy hit theatres on August 1st. August 1st isn't traditionally a huge weekend for summer blockbusters, but this movie changed that. It actually opened to a massive 94.3 million, and it ended up grossing 773.3 million worldwide. This then became Marvel's third highest grossing film to date. It's not a sequel. It's not an Avengers movie. It is the beginning of an entirely new franchise using essentially what's unknown superheroes, or I don't even know if you can call them superheroes, unknown characters. It was also the third highest grossing film of 2014. Critics loved it, audiences loved it, and it really did change Marvel for good going forward as well. Imagine what that does to your confidence as a studio, where you can do something like that and go as weird and as big as this film goes, only for it to still be a massive hit. Which brings us to the big question. Colin, what did you think?
I really enjoyed this one.
That's
really
very, very good to hear.
Really enjoyed this one a lot.
I love that. And yourself, Rob, how was this rewatch for you?
Well, it was the first time I watched it with the audio commentary facts. Just an overview, a little review of the audio commentary. It was a joy. James Gunn is lovely to listen to. He's very complimentary of pretty much every cast member. In each scene, he'll pick out one sort of really small role, or he'll be like, "Oh, unfortunately, we had to delete this person, but they did wonderful work," and he gives their name a shout out and things. Just seems like a real nice dude.
James Gunn is an utter delight. Yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot more. Like, I've always enjoyed this film, but it was nice today watching it again after I haven't watched it in a long time, and having the audio commentary on it actually was good. You know, it was nice to sort of hear it from a perspective where it was still new.
No, I'm in agreement with you. I think this film is a near miracle. It features some of the most vague and, like I said, unknown superheroes, but not just in Marvel, but out of, all superhero properties. It features, 2 completely CGI characters as part of the main cast, and they happen to be a talking raccoon and a sentient tree. So not only does it work, it's a great, great film. I don't think there's a higher compliment I can give the film, really, other than saying I can actually remember sitting in the cinema watching this for the first time and thinking, oh, this is how it must have felt to be, watching Star Wars for the first time in the cinema. It's mad to me that this is one of Marvel's biggest hits. They're creating all these films with established superheroes, and they were obviously massive hits for sure. But then they come out with these essentially unknown characters, and it took more money than a lot of them. And like I said, just imagine what that can do for your confidence. And it allowed Marvel to think even more outside the box in the future, allowed them to be braver, and maybe even allowed them to maybe move away from the more conventional superhero movie. It was a massive, massive turning point for Marvel. So I am very intrigued to get into both of your thoughts even deeper. So shall we do a deep dive?
Yes.
Let's go.
Perfect. So, in 1988, following his mother's death, a young Peter Quill is abducted from Earth by a group of alien thieves and smugglers called the Ravagers, led by Yondu Udonta. Nice, brief little first little deep dive here. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Rob, you might be able to answer this. Is this Marvel's first cold open, or have we had a cold open before?
I think this is the first.
I think this is the first because I picked up on it for the first time as well.
So yeah, it's
I know
our,
it's
it's our opening scene,
unconventional.
and then we get the big Marvel logo.
Yeah.
Because
That was quick.
audio, commentary, facts. So originally with test audiences for this film, when they were showing it around trying to get sort of an idea of what works and what doesn't, originally the Marvel logo came before this bit, and we went straight from him being abducted to Chris Pratt's older Quill and his first scene. And it was Kevin Feige who was the one that said, we need to break these two bits up and separate them. And then after that, the scores improved and it just worked. And I agree, I think it works 10 times better that way.
Oh, I love Mr. Feige. So although this is a film set in space, we're opening on Earth, and I actually think it's a really touching introduction to Peter Quill, who will eventually obviously become Star-Lord. So any actually opening thoughts on this first sequence, Rob?
It's so important. I think if you imagine taking that out,
Yeah.
and your first scene and only introduction to him is him dancing around the thing, you wouldn't have that context to know you just think, oh, this is a man baby, without that context of why he's stunted as development wise as a bit of a sort of infantile kind of kid. It completely works, and for how they pay it off.
Yes,
as well.
It's all a lovely setup as well. Like Colin, just like we said, it does a great job at setting up, some of the emotion of the film. At least it does to me, anyway. Was it an effective opening for you?
Yeah, I thought it was. I actually really like the fact that they left the Marvel bit out, like you guys were saying. It threw me off to begin with, because obviously most of the time at the beginning I send you boys a picture of the Marvel.
Of course you do, yeah.
To say like, oh, I'm going in, and I started it and I was like, what's going on, But yeah, like you guys said, I don't think it would have had the same effect. I mean, just having that little breakup with the Marvel logo coming up in that, and then it coming up with the 26 years later, or however many years it was. It worked well.
Yeah.
And it was quite an emotional scene to start with as well.
Really-
that little
The
boy
kid
was
is
a good
great.
actor. The little kid was a good actor, wasn't he?
Do you recognise
Yeah, he's
him?
great. He started getting a lot of work recently.
Really?
He's the kid from It, right?
Yeah, and
That TV show.
I'm
we
not
love.
okay with this.
I'm not okay with this on Netflix.
I was going to launch into a pilot season jingle there. I had to stop myself.
Yeah, sort of echoing on from you two, I think it's a wonderful opening. It's not only a really effective opening scene, but yeah, it's incredibly touching. It's heartbreaking to me that the last thing Peter's mum wanted was for him to hold his hand, and he was too scared to. That's horrendous. And like you said, Rob, but it's also perfectly setting up the ending of the film, which we will get into eventually.
Yeah.
So, 26 years later, on the abandoned planet Morag, Quill steals a mysterious orb, but is then attacked by forces led by Korath of the fanatical Kree renegade, Ronan the Accuser. Although Quill escapes with the orb, Yondu discovers his theft and issues a bounty for his capture, whilst Ronan sends the assassin Gamora after the orb. So then, once that cold open is out of the way, we can now sort of get right into the meat of the film. I think it spends a great amount of time, setting up this mysterious planet, this mysterious character combined with, the music's all very dark and ominous. It's raining, there's storms. And then everything changes once the Walkman comes out, and suddenly we get this massive, bright yellow font for the titles that splash across the screen. Fuck me, that splash across the screen once that beat kicks in. And to me, that is James Gunn, the pilot of this ship, so to speak, putting on, the seatbelt sign to say, we're in for a ride now. Because, we've jumped straight into this opening scene, and it's a fight scene, it's a chase scene, but it also feels like it's pulled straight out of like an Indiana Jones movie, or there's like a Star Trek movie or something like that. So, Colin, yet again, how was this next sort of introduction for you? Again, was it effective? Were you immediately engaged by it?
Yeah, the whole of this movie felt really nostalgic to me, even though it's not that old. I guess the fact that the cassette tape comes from 26 years previous to that point helps a lot with that. But the whole time throughout watching this, I was like, one, I wish I saw this in the cinema, and two, I wish I saw it in the cinema and somehow I managed to be like 12 or 13 years old, because it would have been my favourite film in the world at that point in my life. I think so. So yeah, a lot of it worked. I love the way, Chris Pratt or Peter Quill's character, the comedy balance between, his sort of when he first goes in to get the orb and he's like calling himself Star-Lord, and they're just like, what? That whole thing is it was really good, man. It was a great start.
Come on, man, it's good. So Rob, then Chris Pratt as Peter Quill or Star-Lord, perfect casting, surely.
Yeah, I mean, you saying about Indiana Jones, I remember after this came out, there was like so many people doing real good photoshops of Chris Pratt as Indiana Jones, and you were like, I can 100% see it, and that doesn't come from nowhere. It's because this film like borrows something so well. The thing that people loved about Indiana Jones is that he wasn't perfect, he wasn't slick, he was scraping by the sorry George, but the skin of his teeth, and that's what people like about Star-Lord, is that he's thinking on the fly. He gets shot at. He's on the floor, uses his rocket boots to blast out a hole in the wall, and it's so well done and beautifully shot as well. It just uses slow-mo and everything. It just looks so great.
Yeah, that one shot of him jumping towards his ship all in slow motion in all the rain. Perfect. And I'm sorry to say, Colin looked absolutely great on the big screen. Yeah. So I guess you've already said it as well, that you're in full agreement that, Chris Pratt is somewhat of a star.
Oh, 100%, man. It's one of those films where you can't imagine him not being, you can't imagine that character being played by anyone but Chris Pratt by this point.
No, he nails it. Good. So, when Quill attempts to sell the orb on Xandar, the capital of the Nova Empire, Gamora ambushes him and steals it. A fight ensues, drawing in a pair of bounty hunters, the genetically and cybernetically modified Rocket Raccoon, and the tree-like humanoid Groot. Nova Corp officers capture the four, detaining them in the Kiln prison. So, already we're introduced to Groot, Rocket, Gamora, even our villain, Ronan the Accuser, all in these first couple of scenes as well. Rob, does it all happen too fast, or is the film better for it, introducing everyone to us so early?
It's definitely better for it in terms of the Guardians. Ronan, I suppose we'll get to him more in general, but I feel, in fairness, his introduction was quite interesting, sort of having this ritual, and there was an air of mystique about him, like, who is he, what's this whole... And he's shown as pretty brutal from that first scene. You can see what James Gunn was saying. He wanted him to
behead someone in his first scene, right?
Yeah, then sort of siphons off the blood, doesn't he? It's quite... Yeah,
very Blade, wasn't
it? Yeah, it was really, like... I think that's quite a good intro for him. What I liked about that scene on Xandar was Excelsior!
Yes!
So we got
pervy Stan Lee again.
Another pervert Stan Lee, yeah.
Yeah.
He's Rocket looks at him and says, "Mr. Smile over here, where's your wife, old man? What a class A pervert." And I had to look up, right? Because I suddenly thought to myself, this is the first time thinking this while I was watching it. I thought they got that line, "Where's your wife, old man?" And I had to look up. This is morbid, but I had to look
whether
up
she died yet or not.
Had she died yet? And no, she died in 2017. So she was still alive at this point. Wasn't bad taste.
No, we know James Gunn has a dark sense of humour, but thank
He's
God.
not that dark, no.
So yeah, Colin, as someone who was coming in fairly fresh to this film, I kept thinking to myself, coming into this film on a blank slate, I wondered whether it was maybe quite disorientating, getting introduced to so many larger than life characters. Because obviously you are very new to all of this and you haven't seen any of the trailers as well or anything like that. So Marvel actually did a really good job with the trailers leading up to this film. All the trailers were essentially just already setting up the characters for us. That scene where they get to the prison and they're all standing there getting essentially their mugshots taken, and the lovely, incredible Peter Serafinowicz is giving us all the information about this is Groot, this is so-and-so. That was actually a trailer. At one point, that was just a trailer.
Right.
So everyone knew who these characters were.
Sure,
So
yeah.
for you, was it easy to sort of keep up?
I think Rob kind of touched on it when he was at the beginning of his answer, which is it didn't feel too bad on the Xander, meeting the actual Guardians. I did feel that when you got into the darker, spacier moments when you were meeting Ronan, that bit was jumping around a bit, and some of the conversation kind of flew over my head a little bit. There was a lot of like strange names and strange planets and stuff popping up, and I mean it wasn't detrimental to the film, but there were a couple of moments where I was like, Christ, I hope I don't have to remember everyone's name like over this last scene. So yeah, I mean I guess the trailers and stuff probably would have been handy, but it didn't take me out of the film by any stretch.
I felt that whole Xandar sequence where they're fighting over the orb felt very much, talk about Indiana Jones again, felt like the opening of Temple of Doom where they're trying to get the antidote. Everyone's scrambling over this thing that's like bouncing from person to person or place to place, and it was just really well good. It was well good.
Really well good.
Well good.
It was well good.
Oh, hang on. Didn't you have something blokey? That's how blokey would say.
Oh yeah,
That's exactly what
that's
Blokey would say.
That's what Blokey thought of that scene.
It well good.
So, an inmate in the Kiln prison, Drax the Destroyer, attempts to kill Gamora due to her association with the powerful intergalactic warlord Thanos and Ronan, who killed his family. Quill convinces Drax that Gamora can actually bring Ronan to him, though Gamora reveals that she has betrayed Ronan, unwilling to let him use the orb's power. Learning that Gamora intends to sell the orb to the collector, Tanaleer Tivan. I'm struggling with names. Quill, Rocket, Groot, and Drax work with her to escape the kiln in Quill's ship, the Milano. So then, let's keep going on casting. Colin, Dave the Bautista as Drax the Destroyer. His character too much or one of the highlights of the film?
He definitely grew on me as the film went on. Initially, I was like, okay, it's an ex-WWE fighter. He's playing this big kind of, bulky, giant, intimidating bloke. And I was expecting him to just be very one note. But definitely by the end, I was a fan.
Good.
He grew on me a lot throughout the film.
So
His
Rob,
comic timing's so good.
Yeah.
I was about to say, so any more thoughts on Mr. Dave Bautista, Rob?
I think it takes, I can't imagine that's an easy thing to do, to play. It's not even playing the straight person, is it, really? It's playing, taking everything so literally.
His
said
character literally does not understand metaphors, and that is genius.
He said that he had an autistic fan get in touch with him and say that it was like amazing to have someone that's a hero that speaks and struggles understanding that sort of stuff like they do. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. I never really thought of it from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, to play it like that and still get laughs out of it, a lot of it comes down to its timing and his delivery. Like I've seen that, it's available online, the audition he did with Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
And even in that first audition, it's spot on.
Yeah.
Was that his first sort of movie role or big movie role then? Had he done a lot before then?
He'd been in RZA did a film, didn't he? The Man with the Golden Arms, was it?
Yeah.
It's got like Russell, it's like a sort of kung fu film. It's got Russell Crowe and want to say Method Man.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, it's got a load of people in it. But yeah, he was in. I think that was literally one of the first things he had done, other than WWE.
Yeah. And it just propelled him. Since then, he was he was one of the villains in a James Bond movie. He was incredible in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049. He's even been cast in Knives Out 2, the sequel to obviously Knives Out.
Wasn't he just in that big Netflix release as well?
Sorry, Colin.
Wasn't he just in that big Netflix movie release, Army of the Dead?
Yeah, he's the lead in the Army of the Dead. Yes, from Zack Snyder. So he's very much sought after. Yeah, he's incredible. Because there's so many good moments during this whole sequence. I love Drax's intro so much. He's such, like you said, he doesn't understand metaphor, so he must be such a fun character to write as well, to have a character take everything so literally. And Dave Bautista, he just gets everything completely spot on. Right from this sequence as well, with Quill telling Drax that, he can kill Roman, by doing the slitting of the throat thing. And he's like, why would I put my finger on his neck, or why would I put my hand on his neck? And I love little bits like that. There's one point throughout the film, Gamora calls him a princess, and he takes so much offense to it because I'm not a princess. I
like when Rocket says he doesn't understand metaphor. Everything goes over his head. He goes, nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it.
So good. And that whole scene as well, it ends on such an odd note with and a funny note as well, with Drax walking away with that dude's favourite knife. That makes me laugh.
That was improvised as well, apparently.
Was it really? That's great. So yeah, like you've sort of mentioned the prison break sequence, Colin. It's a fun sequence, right?
Yeah, one of the highlights, I think, for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was when it really kind of got me like into the film.
I agree. A lot clicks into gear
because there was a lot thrown at you in the first. I don't even know what the sort of time frame was. Maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, or something.
I'd say
by
so.
That point. Yeah, there was a lot thrown at you by then, and this scene kind of just tied a bit of a bow on that, and then from then onwards you feel like you're just in it and you're ready to go.
Yeah, I completely agree. All the characters are now sort of set up. We sort of know how they tick. Drax has now joined the crew. It makes sense. Rob, how's that prison break sequence for you?
I really like it. I mean, it's the first time you see them work together. I mean, they're not working together because they have to, or they want to, rather. They're doing it just because one's got leverage over them. It's all about sort of like not trusting each other, but knowing they're probably the best bet they got. And the whole thing where Rocket's explaining the plan and Groot's taking the
Groot
battery out in the background.
Starts it already.
Then they just have to improvise. Yeah, that was
and the whole thing about the leg.
Genius.
Yeah, it's written so well. But the thing is, there's so much good action as well. The whole bit where Rocket grabs the gun, he's like, oh yeah, and jumps on Groot's shoulder. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, there's so many sort of like punch the air moments.
Yeah. You've completely listed all the things I love about this sequence as well. My highlight of that sequence is Rocket listing all the items he needs. And, one of them being a guy's prosthetic leg. And turns out it has absolutely no significance in the prison break itself. He just thought it would be funny to see if they could get his leg. That's a very, very James Gunn thing. I love his sense of humour in that bit. It's just a perfect example of it.
A couple of nice cameos as well, isn't there, in that section?
There is. So the big blue alien that initially sort of threatens him at first is Nathan Fillion, if I'm correct.
It is, yeah, doing a voice, but he's been in all of James Gunn's films that he's directed. And then there's one of the inmates from up above when they sort of turn up. He's pointing and jeering down at them, and it's like a slightly old man, but he is the founder of Troma, which is like a sort of B-movie, independent, schlocky horror studio. And that's where James Gunn got his start, directing Romeo and Juliet, or writing it at least.
Oh wow, okay.
And he put him in the film, yeah.
Very, very nice.
You gave me a look there, said say I stole the trivia, and I hope that's right.
It's not my trivia, don't worry. So continuing on.
Not now.
Quill's group flees to nowhere, a remote, lawless outpost in space built in the giant severed head of a celestial. A drunken Drax summons Ronan, while the rest of the group meets Tivan. Tavan opens the orb, revealing the Power Stone, an item of immeasurable power that destroys all but the most powerful beings who wield it. Tavan's slave Karina grabs the stone, triggering an explosion that engulfs Tavan's archive. So yet again, I think this sequence is packed full of great stuff again. We get introduced to the Collector, who we last saw in a post-credit scene for Thor: The Dark World. Benicio del Toro, yet again, having the time of his life. But I think it's worth mentioning here, Rocket. We get so many little glimpses and hints of his backstory in this film. Firstly, in the prison, where Quill, he sort of gets a little look at Rocket's back, and there's like little shards of like metal in it or something. It's quite difficult to tell what it is. It's also interesting to me that Rocket has never heard of a raccoon. There's a bit where Quill he's like, I'm stuck in here with a raccoon, and he's like, what's a raccoon? But it's when he's drunk, he lets a lot slip, and his character is actually so full of anger and hate. It's quite an upsetting scene. So Colin, this is a sentence you probably never thought you'd hear. Did they make you sympathise with a CGI drunken raccoon? Or was that one step too far into this journey into the MCU for you?
No, man. I think it's a credit to the writers and all the people involved, because I thought about this when the film ended, and it's like, I think that two of the most powerful characters for me so far were basically Rocket and Groot, and it's a friggin' CGI tree and a a talking raccoon. And when he says he doesn't understand what a raccoon is, he says something after that like, there's only one of me or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just before you. So there's a lot. I hope if there is another film, which I'm sure there will be, I hope you delve more into his backstory and things like that.
I've got the line here that from when he's drunk that George was talking about, because I remember it being the part in the film and I was like, okay, I'm interested. I want to know more about him, because he says, so Drax has been sort of fighting with him basically, and sort of taunting him, calling him, doesn't he call him vermin? Yeah. And he says, he thinks I'm a stupid thing. He does. I didn't ask to get made. I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over and turned into some stupid little monster. Like, that is... I mean, for essentially I wouldn't say it's a kid's film, really.
No.
I wouldn't say, like, very young kids. I'd say, like, over the age of 10 onwards. Yeah, it's sort of touching on tones that are different to what we'd seen previously.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Winter Soldier was the first to start off those darker tones, and
yeah, you guys said, didn't you, that was a new kind of turn of a page into something a little bit more adult. It still appeals to kids. They realised
that their audience was actually quite a mature audience.
It's like there was a line that Chris Pratt says in this when he talks about, oh yeah, it would be different if you brought a UV light in this
if you had a black light in here, it looked like a Jackson Pollock painting.
It's a Jackson Pollock. That's the one. Yeah,
I remember. In the cinema, looking around to see all the kids and being like, "Oh, I'm so glad they don't get that."
But that in itself. Oh, here we go.
For God's sake!
Although my son's just woke up, so I'll leave the trumpet in the case for next time. The Jackson Pollock painting was an improvised joke between Gunn and Pratt on the actual day of filming. Nice. It's supposed to be Gamora saying, "This ship is a mess," and walking off, and that was the end of the scene. And then Chris Pratt said, "Yeah, you think this is a mess, you should put a UV light on it," and left it there. And then James Gunn gleefully ran on set and was like, "Say it looks like a Jackson Pollock painting." And they put it in as a way to sort of make test audiences laugh, and then thinking it would never stay in. But then, because it got such a big laugh, possibly the biggest laugh of the whole film, Kevin Feige kind of had no choice but to keep it in.
This is a Disney film.
Mental.
Madness. And it's yet again, we also get a small introduction to the Infinity Stones as well.
Christ, yeah, those things are powerful.
Yeah, it's quite an expositional scene with the Collector about these Infinity Stones. Yes, he's quite powerful Infinity Stones. So, Colin, was this introduction to these stones handled well, or did it sort of halt the movie's plot again?
I guess by this point, I mean, I already know that the Infinity Stones play a huge part in, where things go in the MCU.
So it maybe made you sit up and listen a bit more.
It did for me, and I guess it probably did for you guys as well, because I can imagine you've probably been doing your research and stuff after what you've already found out about the certain Infinity Stones. And I mean, I guess this is in some way related to the comic series, the Infinity Stones and stuff, I imagine. So maybe some people
there
already
is
knew it.
some comic issues known as we end up getting something called an Infinity War. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I think it was needed, knowing that this is an MCU film. I think as a standalone film, you probably could have glossed over that and no one really would have known or cared much more about it. And it's probably the same with the Thanos thing. Mm-hmm. It's like you could have taken him out and the film wouldn't have really been that much different. Yeah. But with the fact it's tying in with the rest of the series,
sure.
But yeah, it was a good introduction to just see the power that these things have, and I guess we'll see a lot more of them down the road.
Rob, what about you? When you first saw this in the cinema, maybe did you care? Did you sit up and pay attention, or yet again, did you just want the film to continue with its main plot?
Oh no, I was definitely interested. I think as well as a nerd, I was trying to spot all the little things in the background as well. You can see at one point when she's Karina, the woman who works for the Collector. She's cleaning like a case, and it's got a dark elf from Thor: The Dark World in it.
Yeah.
And then there's I think that's a Chitauri from Avengers in one of the cases as well. So I was sort of like, oh, what's that? Watched it. But I think like it's not like the end of Thor, isn't it? Like you said, at the end of the Dark World's the first time they mention it's an Infinity Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I was just sort of getting more into the fact that they were talking about them more and sort of leaning into that direction. It wasn't just like, oh, is that an Easter egg we might not pick up on?
Yeah.
Is that a next time baby thing, or is this a real thing?
It's at the end of the Dark World when they hand him an Infinity Stone, and I don't think they've quite known they've handed him an Infinity Stone, because they hand him the ether, don't they? And it's only when they leave he's like, a one down. Is it?
Yeah.
5
or
to
2
go.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know he's sort of collecting these stones. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Ronan arrives and easily defeats Drax, while the others flee by ship, pursued by Ronan's followers and Gamora's adoptive sister, Nebula. Nebula destroys Gamora's ship, leaving her floating in space, and Ronan's fighters capture the orb. So, let's get into him then. Colin, how was Ronan the Accuser as a villain for you?
He was okay. It was not really a focal point for me in the film.
Mm-hmm.
He just played the kind of the bad guy with the face paint, and that was about it, really.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to it didn't really take anything away from the film for me, though. It kind of felt like it needed to be there to progress the storyline.
Yep.
But for me, the film wasn't really about who the villain was. It was more about getting to know this group of characters and how they're like this band of misfits kind of joined together, and
it's a good way to look at it. So he was no Winter Soldier.
I mean, how much can you do with a character like that? I mean, he didn't have a whole lot of dialogue, from memory.
No.
And I mean, yeah, it was interesting at the beginning when you first got introduced to him. You saw just how sort of powerful he was.
Yeah.
And that he was clearly not a nice dude. But other than that, I mean, he was okay.
Yeah. What about you, Rob?
I agree with Colin. I think it is really about bringing that team together, but you need something for them to come together about, and that's pretty much all he is. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would much more prefer there to be a bit more depth in the villain. They kind of hint at the fact that he's part of this war that's gone on between Xandar and the Kree and things like that.
That's all we get, really, isn't it? There's hints that there's been a war.
See, in a lesser film, say like Thor: The Dark World, the prologue would have been that. It would have been setting up Ronan, and it would have been about the Kree and his war and all this stuff. And then we would have cut to Peter Quill. So I prefer that it's looking at those main characters more than it's looking at him.
Yeah, so describing Ronan the Accuser, James Gunn has said, he's the primary villain of this film, and he's a really twisted guy. He has a really religious bent in this film. He's a very sick man, and he has a twisted view of what morality is. Strength is virtue, and weakness is sin, and that's what he lives by. I think he's very scary because of his beliefs, which are real to him. Now, I think it's clear that they wanted, Roman to be some sort of, I guess, like religious extremist. I don't know, but I would have liked, we've already said it, but I would have liked a bit more of a look into what his views actually were. You know, twisted or not, I get what he wants to do, which is obviously kill a whole race of people, but I want more of the why. Maybe if we got some of the why, we could have actually maybe garnered a little bit of sympathy with him, and therefore maybe make the film a little bit more complicated morally and things like that, because I've mentioned it before, that's always something I quite like with my villains. Unfortunately, Ronan is the weakest part of the movie for me. So bear with me for this sequence, it's quite a lengthy one. So Quill contacts Yondu before following Gamora into space, giving her his helmet to survive. Yondu arrives and then retrieves the pair. Rocket, Drax and Groot threaten to attack Yondu's ship to rescue them, but Quill negotiates a truce, promising the orb to Yondu. Quill's group agrees that facing Ronan means certain death, but they cannot let him use the Infinity Stone to destroy the galaxy. On Ronan's flagship, the Dark Aster, Ronan embeds the stone into his warhammer, taking the power for himself. He contacts Thanos, threatening to kill him after first destroying Xandar. Hateful of her adoptive father, Nebula allies with Ronan. So then let's maybe discuss Thanos. Because before this film, we'd only ever seen him in the post-credit scene for the Avengers. No one was even really cast as Thanos then. He was simply just a CGI sketch, I guess. And obviously he had no dialogue as well. But now, in Guardians of the Galaxy, he is voiced by Josh Brolin. It's very clear that maybe Thanos is being set up here as quite a major villain. So Colin, did it do that? Do you feel like they set him up well enough? Are you excited to see more of Thanos, or did they sort of drop the ball a little bit?
I would say neither of those comments. To me, it's intriguing enough. Clearly, they're trying to make him look like this. I mean, I think they might even say that he's one of the most powerful or most dangerous people in. There's a line in it at some point. Yeah. So clearly, they're trying to make him out to be this, massive threat, which I'm sure we'll figure out or be told as to why later on in the films. But in this one, it was a bit like it was just a big bloke in a chair that, that was it. Like, I mean, again,
full agreement.
Like I said a few minutes ago, the Thanos bit, you could have taken it out and it literally wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah, unfortunately, James Gunn feels the same.
I do understand why. Yeah, I understand why it's in there, because clearly it has more to do down the road in the series.
Yeah, in full agreement with you, mate. Don't worry about that. So, Rob, what about you? The setup of Thanos, how did they do?
I really thought it was effective when he was almost like a hologram. When it was just his face on that wall when he was talking to Ronan. And I think you could have done it just... him sitting in the seat is so shit. Because he snaps his assistant's head, doesn't he? Like, twists his head completely around Ronan. And they're understand that's a way of showing that, this guy was sort of bossing Loki around last time, and now this guy can snap his neck easy. But what's to stop Thanos just jumping out of his chair and going, "Oi, mate,
I liked him.
That's my personal assistant. I've had him around for ages. He's got extra fingers. I'll let you know your mind wander what I use him for. But Ronan,
God's sake,
it's not on."
It was very much like an old man who just has his singular chair and never gets out of it. Just what I mean, like
just telling people off.
Kind of exactly.
He's got a pack of Werther's original with the
arm. I agree with both of you. I think the ball is slightly dropped here. It does the biggest sin of telling us all the things our villain is and has done, instead of showing us how villainous he is. It's something I always come back to, and it's Star Trek Into Darkness. They do it just as badly as well. So obviously the villain in Star Trek Into Darkness is Khan, and as soon as it's revealed who the villain is, they literally call up another character to say, "We're dealing with this Khan fella, tell us more about him." And he's like, he's one of the most dangerous individuals in the universe. And it's nothing more annoying than us getting told how evil someone is.
Yeah.
That means nothing to me.
Especially when you've only seen him sat in a chair.
And all we
by
do
this
is
point.
sit. It might as well be a toilet as well. He might as well be sitting there taking a dump. It's going to be.
I do agree with Rob though. It was more effective when it was the hologram and he was having the back and forth with Ronan. That was better.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't enough, I don't think.
Because then you've got no reason why he wouldn't get up and batter 10 times of crap out of Ronan.
The thing is, yeah, and also when you just see him sat in that chair the whole time, the only thing I was thinking is like, what else does this bloke do? Like, is he literally just in this chair every minute of the day?
Yeah.
Like, what is he doing?
No, I agree. So obviously Marvel have got big plans for Thanos, but he spends this entire film sitting in this floating toilet, giving out threats and telling people to go do things for him.
Yeah, exactly.
He's no supervillain yet, that's for sure.
Do you know what I just realised he is?
Go on.
Have you seen Wall-E?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know the fate of humankind? They're just floating around as big fat lumps.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything's done for them.
He's one of them.
That's Thanos, isn't he? Yeah.
Poor Thanos in this film, but who knows, Colin? We might get to see him again.
Oh, I know. I'm sure we do.
So
Next time, baby.
Next time, baby. So the Ravagers and Quill's group join the Nova Corps to confront the Dark Aster at Xandar, with Quill's group breaching the Dark Aster with the Milano. Ronan uses his empowered Warhammer to destroy the entire Nova Corps fleet. Drax kills Korath and Gamora defeats Nebula, who then escapes. But the group find themselves outmatched by Ronan's power until Rocket crashes a Ravager ship through the Dark Aster. I love some of the beats here in the fight in the Dark Aster. There's so many little moments that are beautiful, from Groot like illuminating the room they're in once they crash inside of it. And I love the scene where it starts off so heartfelt with Drax telling everyone how good it feels to have friends again. So he says, Peter Quill, you are my friend. Big dumb tree, you are my friend. Even you green whore. Before she stops him, absolutely slays me. But of course, in this scene as well, we get, a lovely little payoff, as we mentioned at the beginning, when one of our henchmen from the beginning of the film calls Quill Star-Lord, and Chris Pratt nails the moment with finally. So, this is almost Star-Lord's origin movie, I guess, and we didn't even know it. And then not forget the great moment where Groot takes out about 20 henchmen all at the same time in incredibly violent fashion. This is his Hulk smash moment, I guess. And then turning almost to the camera and the audience and giving us all a big, proud, cheesy smile. So on that, Colin, how was the comedy for you in this film? Did the jokes make you LOL or SMH?
Please don't. Oh no, that makes me fucking SMH. I'm telling you that much. Yeah, no.
Right, I'm going to sound ignorant. I don't know what SMH is.
Shake my head.
Shake my head.
Oh. No.
Yeah, no. I the comedy was really up my alley. Or, yeah, I really enjoyed the comedy in this one. I think Chris Pratt's or Peter Quill was amazing. Drax was great.
Yeah.
You know that message I sent you guys when I was like, I think I've changed my mind on Groot?
Yes.
I was going to ask you what bit.
That was literally after that bit where he's just completely destroyed all those guys and then turned around and smiled. But he was definitely growing on me throughout the film again.
Great.
I thought it could be one of three moments. I thought it could be the bit where he lights up the room.
Yeah.
I thought it could be the bit where he grows the flower for
that bit was good
the girl,
too. Yeah.
or that bit. I thought if you don't like him after that third bit, you're never going to like Groot.
Well, even almost like the gearing up montage, it almost looks like he shaves, because he close up on his face and he plucks a little flower out of his face.
Yeah.
I think little moments like that are very nice as well.
You saying as well about Chris Pratt's reaction to being called Star-Lord for the first time, when they're in that lineup earlier on, and all the sort of facts are coming up about each of them on the screen, they label him as Space Lord. So it's literally every point in the film, people have been calling him the wrong thing until that moment, and it works. Even the payoff about the Drax drawing the line across his throat worked really well in that moment.
Yeah. Rob. So again, any highlights in terms of the comedy beats in Guardians for you?
I'm a sucker for all the little bits, like Chris Pratt accidentally dropping the orb but catching it when he's supposed to be handing it over, like it wasn't planned or anything, but he's such a good improviser that you can guarantee he's going to turn something funny into it. I mean, we're about to get to one of my favourite sort of funny moments as well. But I think a lot of my favourite laughs come from Rocket and Drax, for me.
The bit when they're all talking about coming up with a plan.
Oh, what?
And there's the whole 12. And
So good.
where the way how much Rocket starts laughing when they talk, that bit killed me.
That's
man.
not a real
that
laugh.
bit really got me.
It's real.
I love the kicker at the end of that, which again, according to the audio commentary facts, apparently the end line of that when Rocky's like, "Oh great, now we're just a bunch of jackasses in a circle." When everyone stood up after saying, "I will join you," and all this sort of thing. Sean Gunn, who is James Gunn's brother, also plays Kraglin, which is like Yondu's assistant, but he was the on-set Rocket, sort of acting it out for the animators, really.
So the cast aren't then performing to literal nothing.
Yeah.
They had to have someone in there. So Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother, as Rob said, is literally crouched on the floor anytime you see Rocket there, and they're performing to him. Yeah.
Okay.
And he was the one that improvised that end line of, "Great, now we're all standing up, a bunch of jackasses in a circle."
So
good.
So good.
I love the amount of improvisation. It really feels fresh. It really feels
Yeah, you can definitely feel there's some improv going on.
Yeah, it doesn't feel stilted and sort of tied down to the script. But even when you have got the scripted moments, like I can imagine that the majority of that speech about we're losers, we've all lost something, really works, because you've got that scene before with Drax where he kind of says sorry and he says, I've been filled with rage and anger and it's all to cover my loss, and Rocket's just like, we've all got dead people. It's so good, and every scene sort of.
But it's during that scene as well we get that
it.
amazing moment from Drax where they start talking about the plan, and Drax criticises the plan, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I don't know. I stopped listening 10 seconds ago. I started thinking about something else." It's so good.
His delivery of it as well. I was not listening.
So let's continue then. So the damaged Dark Aster crash lands on Xandar, with Groot sacrificing himself to shield the group. Ronan emerges from the wreck and prepares to destroy Xandar, but Quill distracts him, allowing Drax and Rocket to destroy Ronan's Warhammer. Quill grabs the freed stone, and with Gamora, Drax and Rocket sharing its burden, they use it to vaporize Ronan. Now, Colin, I know we talk a lot about the emotion in MCU quite a lot, so I'm not going to ask you whether you cried or anything like that, but surely we maybe got a little misty-eyed at that beautiful shot of Rocket sitting alone on the floor crying when Drax sits next to him and gently rubs his back. To me, it's such a wonderful moment of humanity in this film.
Yeah, man. Like I said, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the fact that it was a tree and a friggin' raccoon, and they're getting to me more than the humans are in films, which I don't know what that says about me, but and even the Groot sacrificing himself bit, like that actually got me. That got me close.
Yeah,
man. That got me real close.
Groot.
I bet you cried, didn't you?
I can remember getting a little emotional at that. Yeah, sure. And that line it just had a life of its own after this film. There was T-shirts, "We Are Groot," graffiti all over the world saying "We Are Groot." James Gunn ended up starting a charity where people had to plant trees, and if they sent him proof that he'd plant a tree, I think he'd give like little rewards to people and stuff like that. That scene and Groot just took on a massive life of its own. And
Groot wiping the tear off of Rocket's face was there.
It's powerful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just that moment of Drax touching Rocket Raccoon's back and him flinching. I mean, Framestore, who did the animation on it and sort of did all the majority of the Rocket work, just so good to make it such a, like you said, such a human moment. And it's just a quiet. I love those sort of moments where you just take a moment just to be quiet, and just sort of not just on to the next thing straight away. And he's holding like a stick, isn't he?
He's holding a twig,
like what's left. Yeah, it's really well done. I love it. It's one of my favourite bits of the film, I'll be honest.
Yeah, agreed. So, Rob, again, do you care to talk a little bit about how our heroes dispatch of Ronan? Because obviously this whole sequence, it starts with, the dance-off that saved the galaxy, and then ends with the team using an Infinity Stone to then kill Ronan.
Well, it's like the rule of three, isn't it, in comedy, where they've had the setup of him talking about Kevin Bacon and Footloose. Mm-hmm. Then you got that wonderful line from Gamora when she's like, "We're just like Kevin Bacon," and then just like Kevin Bacon, he dances to save, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I love that line. It's like, "I'm distracting you, you turd blossom." I think it really works.
Yeah.
You think you're going to get something generic and cheesy, and you get something completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And then and how powerful that moment is when they're all holding hands, and he sees his mum every time. That's what almost gets me.
He's possibly in this moment as scared as he was. That's how I look at it anyway. He's as scared as he was in this moment as he was by his mother's deathbed, and that is what reminds him of that moment. And looking over, it's obviously Gamora is trying to take his hand to try and, as I said, take on the burden of the power the stone is giving out, and he's terrified yet again to reach out, but this time he does it. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so well done, and it's been so much time has passed since the opening that when it gets to it, it really works. It's not one of those things as soon as you see it, you think, that's how they're going to end it.
No,
It hits you so out of left field. It's great. And then that line of "you said it yourself, bitch, we're the Guardians of the Galaxy," just
amazing.
Do you remember the posters when it came out?
There was loads of different posters, and I remember them all being incredible.
Yeah, the first poster they ever released of the Guardians, which I think it came out maybe even before the trailer, and it was just all of the Guardians stood looking heroic, and it just said, "You're welcome."
Yes,
the tagline.
"You're welcome." That was it. Yeah, so good.
And I think from that point on, I'm like, well, they've got a very different tone to any other sort of group of heroes. At this point, we got the Avengers as the comparison, and they're completely different. They stand apart from them.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So how was this final sequence for you, Colin? We've already had that large scale battle sequence right before it. Should they have kept it big, or did you appreciate the scale getting slightly smaller for this final fight sequence?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with what Rob said, is that they could have easily just done a generic, another battle. And yeah, I really like the fact he started dancing. It made me smile. And then that moment when they're all grabbing onto the Infinity Stone, that bit was epic, man. That shot of them all holding onto it.
It's so powerful. They're all willing maybe
so
to die
good.
in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, I really liked it. Can't fault it.
Awesome. That's so good to hear. And I haven't got it noted here, but I've just remembered in that big final battle sequence that I mentioned, when they're all spaceships everywhere and stuff like that, we do get my favourite line of the film. It's Peter, once the Nova Corps finally arrived to rescue them, shouts, "They got my dick message."
Oh yeah, that was good.
That is the best line of the film.
And how happy and full of glee he is when he says it.
Also, how good was John C. Reilly in his scenes?
He's so good. John C. Reilly is always amazing. He's very, very funny in this last sequence as well, once they start talking about maybe different crimes that they can commit as well.
Oh, yeah.
Very deadpan in that, and very, very funny. So, in the aftermath, Quill tricks Yondu into taking a container supposedly containing the stone, and gives the real stone to the Nova Corps. As the Ravagers leave Xandar, Yondu remarks that it turned out well that they did not deliver Quill to his father per their contract. Quill's group, now known as the Guardians of the Galaxy, have their criminal records expunged, and Quill learns that he is only half human, his father being part of an ancient unknown species. Quill finally opens the last present he received from his mother, a cassette tape filled with her favourite songs. The Guardians leave in their rebuilt Milano, along with a tiny little Groot who has now grown into a baby version of Groot. So quite a couple of next time babies here. Colin, are you intrigued to learn more about Peter as well? Because I know you said
Most
you were
definitely.
intrigued to know more about Rocket. What about Peter Quill now?
Oh, without a doubt, man. Yeah, and even can imagine we'll probably learn a bit more about Yondu as well, and because he was obviously working for
Someone.
Peter's dad or someone that needed. Yeah, so there's a lot to delve into there, and I'd love to see more. Let's just get on to number 2, mate. Fuck the rest of the films.
You said the exact same after the Avengers as well. Patience is a
know,
virtue of
literally-
these films, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, but if I've got to sit through another Iron Man 3, then I can't be arsed. Let's just get on with it, you know?
Christmas. So, Rob, one of my pet hates in films are when things are very clearly being set up when it has no real impact on the current film we're watching. But, to me, all of this completely works. Did it for you?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, when you have a montage at the end of a film, it can be really... It's a difficult thing to do, I think. And then it's the fact that this soundtrack is tied so closely with his mum and the themes. These aren't just cool songs being dropped in for the sake of cool songs.
Mm-hmm.
And when that Awesome Mix 2 comes out, and she writes My Little Star-Lord,
Oh,
all of that bit just ties together. So that's the reason he called himself Star-Lord, because of his mum. It wasn't something trying to be
I got goosebumps.
bigger than he was and things. Yeah. And Ain't No Mountain High Enough has to be the perfect song that she would give her. Because you think she wrote this in that letter. She's saying, well, I know you're scared and you're going through a lot. She knows she's going to die.
Yeah.
So the first song she wants him to hear in that final moment as well is, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, that she'll, which is a beautiful song
To
to
keep me
have.
from loving you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant, perfect. And I think just ending on a song that's so emotionally charged and linked to his love with his mum is amazing.
Yeah.
One of the better endings for a Marvel film.
Yeah, completely agree. So anything else you'd both like to mention maybe before we jump into the ratings?
It would be good to point out the relationship between Peter and Gamora.
Of course,
I
yeah.
thought-
How was that for you?
It was my favourite out of all of them so far in terms of like male-female relationship. I love the fact that at the point where in a few films back they would have had their first kiss, it doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
She kicks me in the balls.
She ends up like slapping. Yeah, that's it. Something.
And
like
she
that.
says,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not going to
couldn't really
succumb
remember.
to your pelvic sorcery.
That's it. and then when he ends up saving her when her ship gets destroyed, and that whole bit was great. I thought they nailed that storyline between.
But
those
then he
two.
really
It
messes
felt
it
very
up after
genuine.
he saves her, doesn't he? Because he says he looked at it as the perfect opportunity to be a hero.
Yeah, exactly. But that just makes it funny,
Yeah.
though. And it was like, it was a much more of an organic relationship build than just like hot guy, hot girl, fuck eyes, done. Like there was a lot more to it than that, and I really appreciate that.
It's such a little moment that Gamora does as well, where he's playing Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and she's looking at him, knowing what that means to him,
And
but
she has a
also
little dance.
she's just a tiny little dance to herself. It's just it's that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued about her and
Nebula.
because do they mention that they're like Thanos' daughters?
They are
a few
Thanos'
times throughout?
adopted daughters.
Oh,
So
okay,
he has
okay.
obviously plucked them from somewhere and he's raised
Yeah.
them to be sort of warriors, I
I'm
guess.
sure, yeah.
But obviously Gamora has now turned against him. And maybe Nebula as well. She's off somewhere. She
seemed like
flew
it,
off.
right?
So
Yeah.
that could potentially as well
I reckon we'll
be a next time baby.
I think we'll see her next time. I think we'll see those two end up having a bit of a, that isn't going to come through
a
in
moment
podcast audio
or
form, is
maybe a
it?
little partnership.
No, I don't think a partnership. I reckon maybe a moment. We'll call it a
Okay.
moment.
Cool. I like
Yeah.
these little theories. This is cool.
Well, I'm excited about this.
Yeah,
one,
it's
so-
good. Rob, anything else you'd like to say?
So I'm intrigued to know what Colin thinks, because the film doesn't spell this out. So that baby Groot, do you think that's the same Groot, or do you think that's a new being?
I imagine it's probably. Is it one of the twigs from when he sacrificed himself?
Yeah.
So if you replant a plant, is it the same plant?
Now we're getting there.
I mean, shit, we might be getting a bit too deep here, but I mean, so I don't know.
George's on painkillers. This is the perfect time for us to get into this conversation.
What does George think? I don't know.
George is still trying not to cry.
We are.
George is still trying not to cry. And Rob reminding him that his mum used to call him Star-Lord.
Oh dear.
I guess that would be the question back: is the offshoot of a plant that then grows into a plant? Is it the same plant?
So if we
Probably
see
not,
Groot
but
again,
it's part of it, right?
Colin, do you want
Yeah.
us to continue with this little baby Groot, or would you hope that he's fully grown by then?
Personally, I would hope he's fully grown. But it wouldn't surprise me if they keep the baby one just because it's much cuter and it'll probably sell a lot more merchandise. And Disney are in there at some point with their their checkbooks and the dollar signs in their eyes going, how do
I
we
don't
make
think
as much
Disney
money
were
as
prepared
possible?
for Guardians to be a success.
No
I remember at the
way.
time there was no merch.
Really?
People were just like, right, we want a rocket, and obviously they made merch, but to start off with, there was definitely not.
I
anything
remember
going.
thinking the same. Even after the trailer, I was like, I need to get me some Rocket merchandise. And there was nothing. There was no Guardians merch.
Yeah, I mean, I love that moment of little baby Groot dancing this pot and
That bit was
and
good,
Drax
yeah,
sort of trying to spot him and
Yeah, that was
freezing.
cool. That was a nice.
Did you know? Audio commentary facts.
Oh my goodness.
Do one deep one per episode. People's bowels can't take it. That is James Gunn provided the reference footage for the dancing. So the dancing that Baby Groot does is James Gunn's own dance style.
Yeah. I love that too.
Is that someone's trivia? Is that your trivia, George?
It's not my trivia, no.
Okay.
But I
Don't know.
panic. I panic every time Rob does his little horns. So, shall we jump in to our ratings out of 5? So, I'm sure you all know that we have a Letterboxd account. Rob has an account. We have one account for Colin Brain versus the MCU, but 3 different ratings. So, Colin's got his, I've got mine, and Rob's got his. And we're all rating the films out of 5 and then also putting them in order of how we think the films are as well. So, by the time we reach the end of this endeavour, we shall all have our own individual rankings. Rob, out of 5.
4.5.
Lovely.
Ronan is what stops it
Yeah.
from being a 5.
Colin John Brain.
4.5.
That's big, mate. That's what you gave Avengers,
Yeah.
so this is big.
Yeah. And I actually think I preferred it over Avengers.
Excellent. So this was your
I think
favourite entry so far in the MCU.
This goes to the top of the list for me, yeah.
That's awesome. For me, it's 4.5 out of 5. I love the
you go.
tone. I'm obsessed with the characters and the performances. I love all the songs. I know we've mentioned it as well, but it's so good. Ronan, again, is why we lose half a point.
And Thanos on the toilet.
And Thanos sitting on the toilet. Yes.
But another reason why I like this one so much is because it really felt like a breath of fresh air in the franchise as well. Like, I got to be honest, when I put this on this morning, or earlier, it wasn't this morning, it was a bit later on in the day, I was starting to think like, oh, it's another one. Isn't it? Like, even no, honestly, even though I enjoyed
Winter Soldier.
What was the last one we watched? Winter Soldier. I did enjoy that, but it almost felt like I needed a bit of a palate cleanser, and like this was way better than I was expecting it to be. I mean, I know I saw it on a plane God knows how many years ago, but like I said, probably fell asleep halfway through, and also I hadn't watched any other MCU films, so none of it would have really gone in. So yeah, it felt like I really needed this one to like give me that pick me up, because so far phase 2 and you guys were banging on about how amazing it is, and I'm sat there like, they're okay, but this is what I needed to kind of bring me back in. So yeah, I'm happy with this one.
Awesome. I love that.
You know too much for your own good.
Now that's what I call using the old head.
So, shall we jump into trivia? Who went
Let's go.
first last time? Because I always forget.
Okay, right. I've got a few options.
Oh,
Trying to weigh up
choices.
Damn, a few?
Trying to weigh up what old Mr. Brain would want.
Let's
right,
go.
I'm going to go this one. So, James Gunn, being, as we discussed, a very friendly and likeable director, he would keep little piles of Play-Doh containers on the set. And if someone did a good job, whether it be an actor, crew member, or whatever, they would win a pot of Play-Doh. And James Gunn said that he gave out 40 pots over an 85-day shoot. He says, I love the smell of Play-Doh, opening a new container, and smelling it puts me in a creative, childlike place. And who doesn't love playing with Play-Doh?
That's cool.
Balls, because that was very good.
I like that a lot.
And I love James Gunn, so that makes me love him even
George,
more.
is
Okay, so I mentioned earlier on that obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy, the actual team themselves, has in the comics been quite a revolving door of members. One of the members in Guardians was actually a telepathic Soviet dog who'd been sent into space called Cosmo. He actually ended up becoming the security chief of the space station in Nowhere before eventually becoming a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And he never really got on with Rocket. So James Gunn has a nice little nod to the comics and to the creators of Cosmo. He is actually in the collector's collection, and he's that little dog sitting there with the spacesuit on and the space helmet, and as they all walk past, he even growls at Rocket to signify that little relationship they used to have in the comic books as well.
I like that. I did pick up on that, well, not knowing that he was from the comics.
He used to be, he was a member of the actual Guardians of the Galaxy in the comic books. Yeah, Cosmo.
Because that's the same dog licking his face
in the post-credits, in the other scene.
Nice. Yes. Yeah. Well, they're both good, but I think George, you can agree with me on this one. Rob's was better.
Full agreement
this week, so Rob gets the point. Nicely done, mate.
I'm going to read what my other one was, and not just to be show-offy, but because I forgot to mention it earlier when I said Excelsior. Did you know there was originally going to be a very different Stan Lee cameo? So originally, James Gunn had planned that the Guardians were going to be walking through the Collector's Vault, and or possibly where your trivia was going to be, where Cosmo was going to be. They were going to walk past Stan Lee, and Stan Lee was going to flip the bird at Rocket.
What?
And Disney were like, nope, you need to figure something else.
Was he going to be in a spacesuit like the dog, or was he just going to be chilling?
I have no idea. No, they don't say. But I thought that was fucking amazing.
Just flipping him the bird. Incredible. So, that's that for another week. Thank you all for listening. Please take a look in our episode description for links to our social media channels and our Letterboxd accounts. We'd love to know if you're doing your own MCU rewatch, because as always, we'd love to have some of you on this journey with us too. So moving on to next week, Colin, we're slowly starting to finish off phase 2 here. So any idea where we could be going next?
Right, well, have we done 4 of phase 2 now?
Thor in phase 2 was For the Dark World.
No, I mean, have we done 4 as in 1, 2, 3, 4? Have we watched 4 of phase 2?
And so we had Iron Man 3,
phase?
we had Thor the Dark World,
Yeah.
Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Guardians of the Galaxy. There are 6 films in phase 2.
So I would have said Avengers, but I'm guessing number 6 would be the next Avengers.
Right.
So I have no clue, because we've had another Iron Man. We've had another Thor, we've had another Captain America. We've now been introduced to Guardians of the Galaxy. We're not going to get another Hulk, because we know that that's not happening on its own. I mean, I would hope it's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but that wouldn't make a lot of sense, because they don't think they would have made it in time. So I can imagine we're going to be introduced to something different again, or we're going to get the third Thor or the third Captain America.
Okay, interesting.
Am I close?
Who knows? Because
Was
next
that
week
all bollocks?
we are watching The Avengers Age of Ultron. It's Avengers time, baby.
Interesting. Let's go. I like
Colin, say bye.
Take it easy. Bye.
Rob, say bye.
We are Groot.
I love that.
Nice.
Goodbye.
Next time we meet, let it be in peace and friendship.
This is as far as you're going to get tonight.
Such valuable stuff. All in a night's work.
Sweet dreams, little friends.
He's escaping. I fear we have not seen the last of him.
And we're not done just yet, listeners. So, in a post-credit scene, Tavan the Collector sits in his destroyed archive with two of his living exhibits, a canine cosmonaut and an anthropomorphic duck. Rob, care to explain who or what that is?
That, unlike me, I'm Howard the Fuck. He's Howard the Duck, who had one of the weirdest films ever previously. Have you ever seen it, either of you?
No, but I know it's known as one of the worst films ever made.
You need to see it. It's so balmy. It's an experience. It's one of those films that you get a load of friends over, you all get a takeaway in, you drink a load, and you just sort of dip in and out of it and go, what? What's going on? So yeah, I remember seeing this in the cinema, and my now wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, going, what? It was like, we waited for that, because we waited all through the credits. I was like, that is Howard the Duck. I have no idea how she's still with me. Yeah, like, that is Howard the Duck.
I know. Made me so happy that we saw him in the MCU.
Do you know who voices him?
Seth Green, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Who's apparently a friend of James Gunn's. But interestingly, what you were saying as well about Cosmo, the dog, James Gunn on the audio commentary facts. Never had one in the post-credit,
Maybe
I don't
not.
think. He was saying, people were asking him after release of the film, is Cosmo now going to be a member of the Guardians? And he said no, because having a real life dog, like a live action dog in the same scene as Rocket, kind of diminishes the realness of Rocket. It's sort of seeing something that's a live action animal and something that's supposed to be a live action animal.
Yeah.
Is too sort of, it could sort of take people out of it a bit. So he said he wanted to pay homage to it, but not ruin.
Also
what
brings
he's
the
already built.
question, maybe a silly question, will we see Howard the Duck again? Well, Colin, next time, baby. Again,
Next time,
thank you
baby.
so much for listening, everyone. That was a lot of fun.
You literally didn't. You haven't asked me what I thought of the post-credit scene already.
Well,
I haven't said a
you
word
know,
about
you know
it.
what? I did have it noted, but then I thought, is it just a fart in the wind, this post-credit? What did you think?
I just thought it was incredibly
Yes.
random. That was all I really thought. But other than that, I mean, yeah, whatever.
Exactly.
You're
That's
gonna
why I
lick
was
your
like,
face?
this is just going to... It's nonsensical, but it's just a bit of fun. Yeah.
I'm surprised with Avengers being the next film, though. They didn't do like a kind of...
A little intro to maybe what's going to happen in Avengers.
Or even just like the event or the next Avengers is coming. Or did you already know that when this
We
one
knew
came out?
that was
it already-
next.
Oh, okay.
And
Alright, cool.
okay, this little sequence can maybe go on a bit longer, but you've already had a small little introduction to Avengers Age of Ultron in a post-credit scene, but not this post-credit scene. Can you potentially remember the post-credit scene for, was it The Winter Soldier, Rob?
Winter Soldier, yeah.
Maybe when we saw two individuals?
Oh yeah, the girl. One of them was like bouncing around in a cage, and the other one was playing with fire or something. Wasn't he? Was it those two?
See you next week.
Next time, baby.
Stay safe, stay well, stay nerdy.